Hi, it's Llarold, and in our last video we talked about the upcoming patch 11.1, the Undermine, and the new Hot Rod. The patch 11.1 PTR finally went up in the middle of last week, so we've had several days to test and complete the entire Undermine questline, participate in this week's raid testing, and drive around in the Hot Rod. So let's just get right into it. First off, actually getting to the Undermine. Things got off to kind of a bad start right off the bat. Sunset and I logged into the PTR to run through the entire questline, and when we got to the quest giver, she had a quest, but I didn't. This is because I hadn't finished the patch 11.0.7 questlines, which are evidently mandatory for unlocking any of the new content. So immediately I had a 1-hour chore to complete before we could even get started. This was something Blizzard did in patch 10.1.7 and 10.2 with Amirdrasil, and I remember the reaction to it being very negative, so I am surprised that they haven't learned from that mistake. Maybe they don't think it is one. My understanding of these 0.7 patches is that they're supposed to be extra story content for players who are into that kind of thing, and I'm definitely not one of those people, so making them be mandatory for unlocking new content seems like an unnecessary annoyance. The quests were quick and easy and fine, but the story just isn't compelling to me. Maybe you disagree, that's okay, but I just don't find that Blizzard storytelling really works for me when they're trying to be serious, and this storyline is as serious as a funeral. I think Blizzard's pretty effective when they're being silly, which will come back into play later on once the goblins show up and start blasting everything. So with that out of the way, we moved into the questline to enter the Undermine. It took place in both the Ringing Deeps and Aj-Kahet and opened a little passageway between them, which is great. I think as far as good old WoW questlines go, we thought it was alright. It wasn't blowing us away, but it was solid. Flying around, killing guys, good stuff. This took us around 20 to 30 minutes, and then we moved on to the Undermine. And that's where things took a turn into a wall, where we got stuck for a while in our brand new hot rods. Right now I'm stuck in the environment, and this happened a lot. I got stuck on so many of the bits of scenery spread around the zone, it was all very annoying. So, the Hot Rod. It's the new feature for patch 11.1, and it is a vehicle. Yep, it's faster than ground mount, but it steers like a brick. There are also some interesting approaches to camera angles while you're driving as well. My camera kept getting locked at a 45-degree angle downward. I kept having to dismount or release my mouse button and click multiple times to be able to look forward. It's pretty hard to see where you're driving when you can't look forward. So if that sounds bad, unfortunately it gets worse, or maybe better, I'm not exactly sure, but you don't unlock the Hot Rod at the start of the zone. You have to do a lot of questing first. I would say it took us another 30 minutes of riding around on regular boring ground mounts before we unlocked the Hot Rod. Now, Blizzard's big appeal to players with the creation of a flying disabled zone this early into the post-Dragonflight skywriting era was that this was a tight, cramped zone in which flying just wouldn't work, and that this mount would gamify travel on the ground in the same way that skywriting has in the air. They really hammered home the idea that this wasn't going to just be pointing your camera in a direction, pressing auto run, and browsing the internet on your second monitor anymore. Starting with the first point, it's just not true. The zone is absolutely adequate for flying. Just look around. There is a massive amount of room down here to fly around. The zone is large. Riding from one end of the zone to the other on a regular ground mount takes a while. But otherwise, this is just a normal WoW zone. I look up at the skybox, I look at how much room is between all the sectors of the map, and I feel like I'm being gaslit. There was absolutely no justification not to fly here other than forcing players to drive the Hot Rod. The Hot Rod is also not a mount that goes into your mouse tab. It requires a separate keybind, and that is really annoying. It also functions like a vehicle while you're in it. This means that you can and will be instantly dismounted at random by driving through quest areas or into shallow pools of water. This was a frustratingly common occurrence, as were random disconnects. In terms of driving, the Hot Rod handles a lot like a Grand Theft Auto 4 car. It's like driving a fast tank, or maybe the end of the zoomy Lynx quest in Hallowfall. It has momentum and it moves quite a lot faster than a ground mount, but it still has a lot slower overall speed than a skywriting mount when you're really moving quickly. It can turbo boost and drift, and that's kind of it. There was also the promise of player customization. You can change the color, you can make the drifting grippy or slippy, you can accelerate faster at the cost of top speed, or vice versa, and you can boost stronger but less efficiently, or vice versa. The only one of these that really made a difference to us was the increased max speed. We both found that losing some acceleration was actually kind of a good thing for navigating between buildings because there are so many obstacles to get stuck on along the way, and going a little slower is actually kind of helpful. It's also good to have a higher top speed when you are trying to go around and do races. This is a significantly less robust system than dragon riding and a much more frustrating gameplay loop due to just how much junk is scattered around the roads to get stuck on. Dragon riding was an expansion level system. I mean, they named the expansion Dragonflight, and this is a patch level system. We're not playing Hot Rod Drive, so the difference in depth makes sense, but the Hot Rod coming at the expense of dragon riding is a mistake. Blizzard's argument is that players wouldn't ride the Hot Rod if they could dragon ride. That's probably true. But think about it. Like, literally just think about it for a second. They realize most players wouldn't use this if they had the alternative to fly. They're intentionally forcing us into using a worse option. Why? At least when you eat salad instead of pizza, there's a health benefit. What's the benefit of driving a car in WoW? I do that in my life, and I'm bored of it already. Okay, back to the Hot Rod. The turbo boost does what it sounds like. It gives you a boost of speed that usually ends by getting stuck on a light post or whatever and immediately stopping. It is useful in long straightaways, that's undeniable, but those are actually kind of rare. Drifting builds up your speed boost, but it's a little weird. When you hold down spacebar, your car suddenly slides around like its tires are transformed into soap. And the instant you let go, it surges forward with a small boost of speed. This is kind of like Mario Kart drifting combined with Grand Theft Auto 4's car physics. It's a combo that goes together like pizza and mustard. With all of this being said, you can absolutely just hit auto run and watch your second monitor. I spent a while learning the car's mechanics, but ultimately, I have switched to just auto running on the Hot Rod, and I've gold timed multiple races in the zone by doing it. That is a disappointment. After the incredible success of dragon riding, the Hot Rod feels like a massive step backwards, like if NASA followed up putting a man on the moon by putting a man in Ohio. Okay, but what about the quests and the Undermine? What about the zone as a whole? What of the vibes? We love the goblin aesthetic. It's fun, it brings whimsy back to WoW, a whimsy that has been missing from the game for far too long. The buildings and NPCs are fantastic, the voice acting is A+. We both love the vibe of the Undermine. The questline, it was very long. There were a few quests that had some major bugs. Maybe the concerns about length were due to us getting to play all of the content in a couple of sittings, as opposed to having it be a time-gated, week-by-week rollout. Nevertheless, by the end of the questline, we were kinda ready for it to be over, and I think a lot of that came from the Hot Rod. Had we been zipping around the zone on flying mounts, I think our reception of the whole experience would have been extremely positive, as opposed to mixed. If you could fly here, I think this would be a great piece of content. Because you can't, and because the justification for why you can't just doesn't hold up to scrutiny, I think it's going to be a disappointment. Let's not end on a downer. This isn't all we did on the PTR this week. We also tested the fourth boss of the upcoming raid, the liberation of Undermine, Styx Bunkjunker. It's a really fun fight. It feels like a combination of a classic ad boss with Katamari Damacy. Periodically throughout the fight, the boss conjures big bombs that will wipe the raid after 20 seconds or so, and then he turns a bunch of random people in the raid into garbage balls. The garbage people have to run around the room picking up garbage piles until they turn into a huge garbage ball, and then they can slam into the bombs and turn them off. There are more garbage people than there are bombs, so leftover players can slam into the boss instead, and by doing that, they chip away like 1.5% of the boss's health. It's a pretty funny mechanic, but it's also going to be critical for meeting damage checks to kill this boss on prog. I like that a lot. The tank is also selected to be one of the garbage people, so yay, doing mechanics. I wasn't thrilled about this at first, but honestly after doing it a few times I kinda came to like it. Good fight overall. The raid is off to a good start, and just browsing the dungeon journal entries for the rest of the fights, I think it's going to be a lot of fun. Well, that pretty much covers it. I really hope Blizzard puts more work into the Hot Rod because right now it is a disappointment. If they just give up and turn on flying, that would also work. We want to fly around and look down from the tops of buildings. We also kind of want to see what's up there. If we could just fly, this would be an extremely exciting patch. If they stick with the Hot Rod as it is now and never allow flying, I think a lot of players are going to have a bad time, and I really can't blame them. Blizzard told us flying would be a core component of the game going forward, and here we are, one patch later and it's banned so that we can drive a car. It's not good, but that's what testing and feedback are for. We're hopeful that they'll listen and act accordingly. Alright, that's it. Thanks for watching. Bye.